Simple question. Why does the first year break most poultry farms? This is something I'm finding out, probably the hard way, but I think it's one of the things that most people hit as the first stumbling block when you start getting into any kind of farming. And why is that? If you think about it, farming is an upfront investment. An upfront investment of any kind, farming, that is, an upfront investment with no guarantee of returns. Literally, it means your entire investment inaweza kunywa maji, for lack of a better way of putting it. So look at it this way. Number one, let's say you're doing dairy, or now in this particular case, I'm doing chicken, right? Now, you definitely have to invest in the animal or the bird. Second thing, you have to invest in the shed, or in this case, the coop, right? That you have to invest in the food. That is the feed itself. And definitely when you buy that sack of feed, be it 20 kg or a 40 kg or 50 kg bag, you will not throw the entire bag into the coop and allow the chicken to just feed as it is. No, you have to buy the feeding trays. Okay. Fourth, after getting all this, you definitely need to find watering spots or watering containers to ensure that the chicken have enough drinking water to continue, feeding, eating on the feed, and also taking some water, as this is very important. Fifth, you have to consider vaccines. And each time the vaccinations must be done on time, because there are very many diseases. On a future episode, we'll talk about the kind of diseases that birds are prone to, how you can protect them from that, and essentially what you can do around all these factors. Now, outside of all those, one of the most important parts that is often overlooked is the labor. If your employees, or if you're doing this directly as an investor, and also you are the labor to cut on costs, that means you need to educate yourself on everything around chicken rearing. You need to maintain proper hygiene whenever entering the coop. How are you sanitizing? What are you using to sanitize? This is very, very important. So when you put together all these factors, you realize that it's 100% investment with zero guarantee of any returns. What you have is practically hope that you are making the right decisions, you're putting the right things in place to ensure that you can actually get a return on your investment. So let's break down each of them. I will try to share with you estimated figures of particular items in the entire chart. And I'll also share the same on the social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Do follow, like, and subscribe if you find this content helpful to you. So I think let's begin with the first point, which is the most important. Let's begin with the coop. For you to build a coop, you need to be able to identify how many birds you want to keep. And when designing a coop, you do not design it for the chicks when they're small. You design it for a full-grown hen, right? Or a broiler, whichever you're keeping. And in this case, remember, we have decided in this case we are putting improved kienyeji. And the particular breed we are using is Kenbro. As this is where I'm experienced, this is where I'll speak about. If you have any questions regarding the other breeds, definitely put them in the comment section. I will research on them and I'll make sure to respond to you. So now that we have decided we are putting Kenbro, we are putting the improved kienyeji bird, right? Now we need to design the coop. So the first question is, how many birds at full maturity and full laying, how many birds do we want to have? So if we identify that we want, say, 100 birds, the recommended sizing and space allowance for any chicken or any hen is usually 1 square foot. 1 square foot of space. So when you're designing your coop, you consider the floor space. What is the total square meterage of that space? Then you divide by the number of birds you want to keep. So for example, if you have, say, 100 square meters of space, floor space, then you can theoretically keep 100 birds. But we have also seen some people maybe squeeze in maybe 10-20% more to cater for, say, mortality and so on. But that is the recommended spacing. So now you've identified what you need. You know you need, say, 100 square meters of floor space. So you first identify where you want to build the coop. So here is where the land comes in. This is now acquisition. Let's assume you do not have land. So you are going to buy land, right? If you're buying land, this is another very important part. You have to consider the location, the accessibility of your farm. Because remember, when you're buying feed, it is always recommended you buy in bulk. So you have identified the land, you have set it up, you have fenced it, you have also put in a small employee or servant quarters and so on, right? So the coop is now ready. The second part is now you need to go buy the birds. We have identified Kenbro, right? Kenbro is popularly supplied by Kenchick. I am not affiliated or sponsored by them in any way. So in this case, they will sell to you maybe anywhere from 115 to 130 per bird. Let's take the lower side, 115 Kenya shillings for a chick, a day-old chick. Remember, we are starting from scratch. We are not going for a month-old or 2-month-old. Why is that? This is the second risk in chicken farming. Whenever you're taking care of your chicken, you need to have full visibility of their vaccination and medication history. Because should they have missed any vaccination at any of the recommended stages, be it 2 weeks, be it 3 weeks, or 6 weeks, or even 2, 3, 4 months, if they have missed any vaccination and you walk up to a farm and they tell you, I have a 3-month-old hen ready to start laying, here's my price. You will ask them, okay, what's the vaccination history? They say XYZ. How sure are you about that? So we decided in this particular case for Hacho, we decided to go with completely fresh chicks in terms of it's a day old, fresh from the brooder. We are taking them and we are growing them from scratch, making sure that we control all the variables. This is very important that your quality control be top notch. Okay, so now we've identified it's 115 Kenya shillings and we are taking 100 birds. So that makes it 11,500 Kenya shillings. So you manage to get them to your coop. Second part, remember chicks are very vulnerable to temperature fluctuation, temperature changes, which means in your coop, you must have a way to regulate that temperature. So you have two options. You may decide to go for, a heater, yenye umeweka makaa, charcoal, that you have positioned maybe 2 or 3 of them within the floor space, depending on how much heat they are emanating. And the second option will be where you find the infrared heater lamps, right? So whichever option you take, this again will factor into your costing. Because if you go for the infrared heating lamps, they are consuming a lot of power. Ask me, I will tell you in the next episode. They consume a lot of electricity, which means automatically your cost of rearing those chicks will be very high if you go for that option. Now, if you go for the first option, which would be to get a charcoal burner that is enclosed properly but also has ventilation to emanate the heat to the chicks. This will be more cost friendly, but it has one huge caveat. Remember, at 1 day old or 2 or 3 day old, these chicks are very vulnerable and they are weak. They are not that strong. So if they huddle together next to the heater, if they huddle together, they may lay on each other and some may die in the process. Essentially zitalaliana na kuna zenye zinaweza kufa. So you have again to weigh your risks and also your financial capacity. So we've identified how you will hit the space. Now the third thing you need to consider, again, remember all this is all upfront investment. You have built a coop, you have bought the chicks, you have already gotten the heater. Now you need to find the feeding trays, both for feed and water, and how to position them. So again, this is an upfront investment. Depending on the number of chicks you have, the more feeder trays it will be required for both water and the feed itself. That is the mash. We'll talk about the various types of mash at various stages and at what points do you transition from one type of mash to the next type of mash. So now coming back to the feed, you've already now brought in the feed. You have set it up. So now the most important aspect, your investment is ready. How do you protect it? The first and foremost is yourself. Your hygiene around the chicks is the most important because you are the first, you'll be the first culprit should any infections come to these birds. And how do you do that? There are two options that I've seen. I'll tell you which one I'm using, then I'll explain an alternative. The one I'm using, we have a sanitizer tray at the door where whoever the employee coming in to maybe put in some feed, put some water, or even clean and sweep the coop, they will step in with their gumboots. They will step in. We have put some jig. This, I think it's hydrogen peroxide, if I'm not wrong. My chemistry is not the best. But anyways, we've put some jig there, slightly diluted, so that they disinfect their shoes when getting into the coop. The reason this is very important, you see, as you're walking around, you may interact with various germs and so on. And when you get into the coop, you are walking on the same floor that maybe some feed will spill and one of the chicks will come and eat from that point. So you are the first point of exposure for these chicks to any potential infections. Now, the second option would be where you have a complete change of shoes and attire when getting into the coop. So you can have a small changing room. I've seen this in very large installations. They have a small changing room. They come in, they wear maybe some dust coat, they wear a hairnet, and they wear gumboots that are only to be used within the coop. Again, this depends on your scale of how many birds you're keeping, what is the size of your coop, and also what's your budget, what is more feasible at that point in your project. Right? So now that is said, the last thing would be you have now to consider the feed. So there are charts depending on which breed you take. There are charts and guidelines as to how many grams each bird should eat. So you need to be able to weigh your feed. So case in point, at the moment my chicks are at about 4 kgs for every 100 birds. So that is 4 kg of chick mash, right? For every 100 birds. So that means every bird is taking around 40 grams of feed. So essentially making it 4,000 grams, which is 4 kilograms. That is now where the money starts piling in and piling very fast. Because when you're stocking feed, you have a guideline. Whoever has supplied you the birds will tell you that for these birds, this is the feeding, this is how much you should continue scaling it. Because remember, at 1 day old, they will not eat as much as they will eat at 2, 3, 4 days old, and so on. And up until full maturity, that graph will continue to grow. The graph of feed will continue to grow. So for example, again, first week, I think I was averaging around 2 kilograms. Right now, I'm almost averaging 4 kilograms for every 100 birds. And so on. It will continue to grow as the birds mature. And once they reach maturity, then it plateaus. So at this point, it becomes very predictable that this is how much feed I will be consuming per month. But as you scale up, as the birds grow, the feed that you're putting into the farm will continue increasing. Case in point, right now, if you're looking at buying, say, 150 kg chick mash, it's about averaging maybe 4,000 to 5,000, depending on the manufacturer and whatever nutrients they have tried packing in as extras into the feed. So that means, again, theoretically speaking, if for every day I'm spending 4 kilograms of feed, and I'll scale down actually, I'll use a 40 kilogram bag. That means, was it a constant? Every 10 days, I will use 1 sack. So for every 10 days, I'll be spending, say, 4,000 Kenya shillings. Now imagine if you had 200 birds. Now you're spending every 10 days, you're spending 8,000 Kenya shillings. And remember, these birds will take almost 14 weeks to hit maturity. Let me just open my calculator here. So if, again, for every 10 days, let's average a week. For every 1 week, you're spending, say, 7,000 Kenya shillings. And you have 14 weeks to go. You can see how the numbers are quickly scaling up, right? So that means we were looking at 6,000 averaging over the next 14 weeks, right? So on feed alone, you're spending 84,000 for every 100 birds. And remember, there's no guarantee that these birds will be able to lay the eggs at the rate you expect. There's no guarantee if you're doing broilers purely for meat production. There's no guarantee that they will fetch you a good market rate. So all this is upfront investment. Upfront investment without the guarantee of making a profit. Yes, you will be able to sell because the demand is there, the market is very big, but there's no guarantee of a profit. And that is why I started by asking a very simple question. Why does the first year break most poultry farms? Capital, capital, capital. This is the most important thing and the biggest lesson I've learned, because without capital in advance or an investor in advance who will be able to fund the entire investment up until maturity of the birds, that is where most poultry farms die out. And that is usually the biggest hurdle, because after that point, once those birds hit maturity, let's assume you're doing, again, like I am doing for eggs production, immediately they hit maturity, you should be targeting around 70% production on a daily basis. So for every 100 birds, at least target to have 70 eggs collected on a daily basis, because that will be able to help you cover the farm cost. And at this point, you are able to potentially break even in terms of the cost of running the business. Not break even in terms of the total investment, only break even in terms of running the business. So then the business can become self-sustaining. And once the business becomes self-sustaining and starts registering profits, then now you're looking at long-term break even in terms of your full investment. Thank you so much for joining us on this interesting episode. I'll catch you on the next episode and we'll discuss a few more topics. I'll share with you my experience and, generally also take your feedback. Any questions, please don't forget to leave them in the comment section and I will respond to you. Cheers.